Before we begin, thank you very much to Stephen D for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much. That is a very familiar name. I know who you are. Welcome back. I do have your previous request still, so I don't know if you're re-upping or like switching things up, but your name popped up, so I'm giving it another shout out. So there we go. I do appreciate everyone who pitches in, even if it's a little bit a month. It helps keep the daily content coming, keeps the channel going, and you know, it lets me pay off the new computer I was forced to buy. Thank you very much, Hurricane. But aside from that, let us get on to our topic of the day. I wanted to talk a little bit about Elita One. Now, on the WTF at TFW podcast, you know, the podcast that I do with Vangelis and Aaron over at TFW2005.com, we just now got around to doing our TF1 review, because life's been nuts for everybody. Everyone's schedule has been kind of insane. But we did finally get together, we did finally discuss the movie, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up and I really liked about the movie was the treatment of Elita One. So, in the last few years, she has had a pretty significant rise in notoriety. So I kind of just wanted to take an overview of the character and just kind of look back at where she started, how she's been treated, and where she is now. Because it's a pretty interesting departure from her origins. So, obviously, we know her from a Season 2 episode called The Search for Alpha Trion. She is one of the female Autobots and the leader of such Autobots. When apparently female Transformers were their own faction. To kind of explain why they were not on Earth. They're all just kind of lumped together. We got a retcon to the ending, by the way. We did get a retcon to like more than meets the eye in order to facilitate this. So now, instead of just leaving and the Decepticons just like quietly following, now Optimus and the Autobots departed on the Ark in the middle of a firefight because they were rocketed as Elita One was trying to get on board, and Optimus, being the hero and this being an 80s cartoon, urging her, please don't. No, it's too dangerous. Too dangerous for the woman. Get back. 80s. Now, she proves herself well enough in the episode. She has a time stop ability, which is interesting, and I don't think anyone's replicated it since then. Point being, she does a good job of being essentially a female Optimus Prime. And if you actually, like, look at the fact that she's left in command of Autobots on Cybertron in Optimus Prime's absence, that would technically make her the closest thing G1 has to a proper second-in-command. In the first 2 seasons, you never really had a hierarchy. You never actually had, like, a chain of command. It was maybe Ironhide, maybe Jazz, maybe Prowl. It was kind of undefined, really. But this kind of gave us a little bit of something concrete. Elita absolutely has some actual authority to her. Now, something else she has, which is actually kind of rare for G1 characters, unless they were like created in the middle of the series, she has a backstory. So we do know that in the War Dawn episode, where we go back to the past and see Orion Pax, that Ariel is there. And Ariel will eventually be rebuilt into Elita One, just as Alpha Trion, basically said it during that episode. That wasn't the original plan. The original plan was for Ariel to just die during the attack, and for Orion Pax to be the only survivor, rebuilt into Optimus. But they saw so many the writers saw so many similarities from the previous episode with Elita One and being like a love interest character for Optimus. They decided to carry that over and just make Ariel an Elita One. That they make him the same character, and that's a brilliant choice. And it does give her a lot more backstory than a lot of the female Transformers did. Gives her more than Arcee did. The truth here is that because Arcee was in the primary cast of Season 3, underused, but still she was there. She was present. She's in the 86 movie. Because of that, she is still seen as like the de facto female of the franchise. She is seen as like a lot of times the first female Transformer incorrectly, as we like completely forgot the Search for Alpha Trion episode. It's almost like when Disney does an LGBT character and a bunch of websites and news outlets go, oh, Disney just introduced their first LGBT character. I'm like, this is like the 7th time they've done that. Except with Arcee and Elita One, it's a very selective memory of, like, we only remember the one. A lot of people only remember Arcee. And I was reminded of that. When I did research for this video, and Google turned up this commonly asked question: Are Arcee and Elita One the same? So apparently there is still confusion, though I guess, considering the only 2 prominent female Autobots in G1 are both pink and white, I guess that's just kind of what's to be expected. Arcee would be the only female that had any real demand in the franchise for a long, long time. Obviously, we wanted all the characters, but that was the one, especially because she had no G1 toy, which left other female characters like Elita One scrambling for scraps. For instance, the first toy we ever got of Elita One was an Energon Arcee repaint done up for the movie line. Not the most impressive thing, certainly does not look like Elita One in any way, shape, or form, but at least it got the name out there, and it reminded people that, oh hey, by the way, this other female Transformer actually existed. Imagine that. Now in 2009, we thought we were going to get a little bit more than that, because Elita One's name was actually attached to the movie. Originally going to be named Flare Up. This was, obviously one of the Arcee triplets, and yeah, they switched the name over to Elita One. It wasn't said in the movie. Arcee's name was barely said in the movie, but at the very least, again, the name is being used. Unfortunately, it is once again in service to Arcee. As I said, the Arcee triplets, and Arcee being the only one mentioned in the movie. It was always about her. Always about Arcee. To the point where Elita One was the only one of the triplets to not have her own toy. Recall the original plan was for the 3 to be able to combine into a larger robot of some kind before those plans fell through. Elita One's new mold would have been the key to lock everything together and actually create it. Unfortunately, they decided to just make her a Chromia repaint, and that is that. So unfortunately, and as we've seen with many of the live-action movies, it's all about Arcee, as it usually was in this franchise. The first time we got an Elita One toy, that was actually somewhat resembling the character, was from BotCon of all places, that saw enough resemblance in her robot mode, her head sculpt especially, which is somewhat inspired by Elita One if I remember correctly, even from the original Thunderblast design. They actually decided, let's do an Elita One out of the Cybertron Thunderblast. Again, it serves a purpose. At the very least, it's the first toy that's supposed to represent G1 Elita One in some way, shape, or form. Certainly better than anything we had to that point. Again, baby steps. The character is at least being acknowledged, even if it's not in the best of ways, and even if she's still not being given the prominence she likely deserves. After all, she has far more claim over first female Transformer than Arcee does. The first time she actually plays a major element in the story again is in 2008. We're introduced to a brand new version of Elita One in Transformers Animated, and this one very distinct. They had plans for Arcee, so they wanted to avoid another pink robot showing up, meaning we get Elita One in yellow, with a little bit of elements from Ariel thrown in, and it's not a bad appearance. She looks pretty good. She had a pretty good character, and of course, she gets mutated into Black Arachnia, which actually allows the Optimus and Elita One connection to have a dark twist to it that they play with throughout the animated series. Interesting way of adapting the character to take 2 females into the one, but it does allow her to connect to Optimus Prime and actually have a past with him. So, Interesting character development, but still, it's not really utilizing the character, because it's more of an origin story for Black Arachnian animated. No. In order to get Elita One to actually have some kind of character and to actually evolve, we have to jump all the way to 2015 when IDW finally gave her a proper shake. This is a sadistic take on Elita One, as you can probably guess by her throne of robot parts. This one is cold, cruel, sadistic, barely what you would consider an Autobot, if you would even call her that. No. She leads the Transformers on Carcer, one of the Titans that left Cybertron in its ancient times. One of the reasons why there are no females in Transformers until they all start coming back in IDW. It's a very different take on Elita One. It puts her as like a very cold rival to Optimus Prime. You know, rather than sharing a history or having any semblance of a romance, instead, it's just kind of a reminder of how cruel a leader can be without being like an absolute despot. She's not a Megatron, don't get me wrong, but she is not a good person. She just happens to be tangentially agreeing to work alongside Autobots for the most part. Regardless, she does have a big presence. I mean, especially when especially when you get to the Windblade book where she's actually trying to, she's putting her name in the hat to become leader of Cybertron. So she does get a lot of prominence. She does get a lot of character. And that's probably the first time that she's had a long stretch of character development and growth, and just is taken seriously in general. And IDW was really good at that, especially in the 1.0 era, utilizing characters who otherwise have been sorely neglected over the years. The downside to this is, despite how prominent IDW made the character, she's still struggling to get that same respect from Hasbro. She finally got a toy that was designed to be her, but unfortunately, not really, as it's meant to be a pre-tool for the Starscream that would be coming later. That said, at the very least, it's the first Elita toy to actually be intentionally sculpted to be Elita One. It's a very buff version of her, and she is now using a jet for a vehicle mode. It's interesting to me that she has so few toys, but if you line up the three toys that are meant to be iterations of G1 Elita One, from the Botcon to the Power of the Primes to this one in Generations, if you put all three of them together, in the span of 3 figures, Elita One actually has vehicle modes to cover land, sea, and air, despite how few toys she has gotten throughout her lifespan. Kind of impressive. It's a very weird footnote, but it's one I noticed when I was putting things together for this video. So, worth mentioning. But this toy also presents problems. So the first one that we just looked at was a pre-tool of Arcee, or of Starscream. This one is a retool of Arcee and is a very poorly received toy. So it wasn't exactly making anybody happy when it came to be Elita One. We still have work to do. This is unfortunately the depiction she would have in her next fictional appearance, which was in the Transformers Siege cartoon. I'm not a fan of her characterization here. She is designed to be a kind of a tough, like, second-in-command type leader character, but she seems ineffective at times and kind of just like, she's there to provide emotional guidance for Optimus Prime more than anything. And then has a death scene that I think is tragic and frankly beneath what the character should have been, where she's just literally dead in the snow when Prime finally gets back to Cybertron. I know it's tragic, but it's a show that did a very poor job of handling trauma and, in particular, giving Optimus Prime a survivor's guilt thing. It makes for a rough sitting. It again is nice to see Elita One getting some attention. I will say this, I think she was used better in the series than Arcee was, so that's a step in the right direction. But unfortunately, it's still not a very comfortable depiction. It's still not great. We have work to do still. That said, we've been dealing with a lot of stuff. IDW was 2015, 2018, and 2020 were the times she got her recent toys. This is also 2020. So we see the frequency has picked up a lot. And in the last decade or so, you can see she has become far more prominent in the fiction than she used to be. Legacy gives Elita One her first toy that is designed specifically to be her from the ground up. While it would be retooled into several other female Transformers, it was her first, and it definitely represents her better than any depiction we have had previously. It's the closest we'll probably come to the vehicle she had in G1, even though like we barely got any look at that vehicle. But it's not a bad toy. In and of itself, it's not a bad toy, and again, steps in the right direction. And at this point, I think we're just going to settle into Elita One just being a major player in this franchise. Her inclusion in Earthspark made me really, really happy, because once again, she is Prime's second in command. And here I think they do a way better job than they did in the Siege cartoon. She actually gets into tussles. She has really good fight sequences in the first season of the show. She acts as a guide for some of the younger characters. So you can see that, you know, she does have leadership potential. She does have command and authority to her. And she commands a lot of respect from the other Autobots and the Terrans. Again, it's a very good depiction of her, and it's far better than she had previously had. You know, this strikes a chord between the more aggressive nature of IDW Elita One, but still the, still the rogue agent who is leading, the rebellion against Shockwave on Cybertron. It's a good blend here, and I think it hits a pretty good character and a good foil for Optimus Prime. They still haven't touched on any kind of romance things, but, kids shows and all that. They've kind of joked about it more than anything. It wasn't just them, though. It wasn't just Earthspark. We saw Elita One take prominence in the brand new comic books from Skybound. She has her own side story going on throughout the early issues that eventually merges into the main story. And again, she is depicted as a very powerful, independent warrior who can handle her own in most situations, and is one of the few people who can actually put her foot down with Optimus Prime and he pays attention. That's pretty significant. And I mean, it takes some nerve. It takes some ball bearings to be able to do that to an Optimus Prime, especially this Optimus Prime. So Skybound, again, doing a good job. She has notes of the original Elita One while still kind of doing her own thing, which makes her a pretty solid depiction overall. And then, of course, right on the back of that, we have her depiction in Transformers 1, where again, I really do like the treatment of the character. While I don't like the idea that she's just kind of there to be like in the girl fight at the end with Arachnid, I like her overall personality. I like her character growth through the series, where she's more dismissive of Orion Pax, eventually realizing that his endless optimism is actually what is needed when things get really dark. I like her. Again, I think her attempts to try and better herself and better her position, the promotions that she is striving for, I feel like that is again more in line with some of the more recent Elitas that have a more aggressive personality. But I do think it works for her, and I'm glad that the character was treated as well as she was. They didn't shoehorn her into a romance or anything. She's just her own thing, and she makes for a very strong depiction of Elita One. I'm very, very happy that, like, in a movie where they really only had, 4 primary characters in the main cast, Elita gets to be one of them, and I don't at any point feel like this needs to be Arcee, or this should have been Arcee. It's entirely her role. She's done a very good job of separating herself out from being the other pink female Autobot. It's a very long way from her humble origins as just a one-off episode. Characters come a long way, and frankly, I hope that she's here to stay. Arcee is kind of the go-to for the franchise, has been for over 3 decades, but it's definitely time to set her aside and let someone else who came before her take the prominence. I'm really happy with how Elita One has been developed. it was long overdue, but we got there, and I hope she sticks around for whatever iteration of Transformers comes next. And that is your history lesson for the day. So, thank you everyone for watching. I do appreciate it. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you have not. I'm always paying attention to those numbers for big celebrations when we hit the right ones. Or just hit the like button. If you can't pitch in on the Patreon, hitting like helps out a lot too. So, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.